Ladies and men of the gentle kind, what is crack-a-lackin'? Today here we have a Metro Exodus PC, and we're only going to be using two parts in this build that are new. The rest is going to be used price performance. But before we take a look at what we got on the table here, let's take a look at the minimum and recommended specs of this game to get an idea of where we want to come in with this PC. So Metro Exodus is the third installment in the series, coming after Metro Last Light, which was released quite some time ago, and the minimum requirements for that was like a Core 2 Duo and a quad core of no name in particular. But this time around they are being a little bit more specific with what they want your CPU and GPU configurations to be. For instance, the minimum requirements are an i5-4440, which is a quad core, and they also recommend you come in with either a GTX 670 or a Radeon HD 7870. And then for recommended specs, they're asking for an i7-4770K, a GTX 1070, or an RTX 2060. Now the RTX card is apparently important here because this game does support some of those RTX features, but we'll be testing that out later in the video. Let's take a look at what parts we have on the table. Now here's what we've got on the table here. We've got a case that's over 10 years old. This is from 2008. I got this on a bargain for 80 Aussie dollars. Now some of the other used deals that I got that were really good was this power supply and also CPU cooler in a combo package for 30 Aussie dollars. We've also got a used SSD, used hard drive, and used 16 gigabytes of RAM, as well as an i7-3930K. Now this is a 6-core, 12-threaded CPU that is overclockable. However, this motherboard here doesn't allow us to overclock, but I am curious to see how this CPU will perform in Metro Exodus once we compare it with the 9900K. And we'll do that a little bit later in the video because we are going to be using the latest and greatest RTX 2060, which is a decent card for $350, but we'll be finding out how well it plays in this game. Though if you guys are itching to put something together that's similar to this build, then I'll put some links in the description below. With that aside, let's get this build on the way. So now we've completed this build and I am just so impressed with this case. I mean, 2008, it's got RGB on it, so you can actually change the colors on the side here to whichever color you want, and you can turn it off if you want. And the fan does a really good job of cooling down the whole motherboard and your whole system. And then underneath that, you've even got a really quiet small fan to cool your hard drives and your SSDs. So this case, I just think it was ahead of its time. The form factor of it is pretty small as well. If you guys know the AeroCool Strike X, this thing's like literally half the size. And I mean, the only critique I can think about it is probably that it is hard to build in, but once you build in this thing, it just looks phenomenal. It's amazing. It's so quiet too, to the point where my rig over there, I can hear my main rig on idle is actually louder than this from where I'm standing. And it's honestly just impressed me that much. I mean, with a bit of fiddling, we managed to get the Cooler Master 212X just fitted inside here, and the graphics card, the RTX 2060, just fit as well. So you will have problems if you try to fit an extended PCB on the graphics card in this case. And in this case, I actually had to pull the shroud out off the top so I could screw the cooler in. And once that's out, that thing's not going back in. So it's pretty cool though. I can just sort of have a little hurricane up the top of my case now. The all aside, it's finally time to install Metro Exodus. I'll also install Apex Legends and we'll see how this thing performs. And then we'll chuck the RTX 2060 on the 9900K and see the difference between this rig and a 9900K for these two particular games. So the build and the benchmarks are here and we've got a lot to talk about. First of all, Metro Exodus, how did this build perform versus the RTX 2060 in the 9900K? Well, the results are looking pretty good. I found an area where I could get high FPS and then replicate the scenario. And here we got 147 average with the 3930K and 94 and 74 1%, lows versus the 9900K, which got 163, 105, and 98 respectively in DX12. Now I did manage to switch over to DX11 and I didn't really notice much of a difference here. It got a little bit higher FPS, 167, 105, and 100 respectively. But when it came to this game itself and trying to test out RTX features and DLSS, it was actually broken. That's the best way to describe it. At first, I thought it was the X79 system and the 3930K. I was like, okay, maybe you gotta get on the latest and greatest hardware for this to work. But sure enough, changed over to that rig and that was having problems as well. The 9900K, again, when I go to turn on DLSS, it would just automatically turn it off. And then I'd turn on RTX and the same things were happening. It was just automatically turning them off. And apparently there's some hard fixes for it, but it's like, guys, if you're spending 82 Aussie dollars or 62 US dollars on a video game, you shouldn't have to fix anything. The game should be fixed without the public being beta testers for your particular video game. So that annoyed me, but in terms of Metro Exodus itself, the storyline already had that flair. I am getting a little bit sucked into it. It is an enjoyable game so far, so I look forward to playing it a little bit more. And the performance is pretty smooth. As we see with those 1% and 0.1% lows, this game does play pretty smooth, providing you have a good hardware, but it will run on lower end hardware absolutely fine as well, providing you turn down some of the settings. Here we were playing at 1080p Ultra, even turned it up to 1440p Ultra, and the results were still very good. Also in the open area, because I did test inside when I was doing the direct comparison, in the open area, the FPS does drop a little bit more. But moving on now to Apex Legends, and the difference between the two rigs this time was even less. The 3930K with the RTX 2060 scored 115 average FPS, 73 and 62.1% lows. And then we move over to the 9900K and they got 119, 84 and 71. Now there is a little bit of variance here since it is a multiplayer title, but this game is very well optimized for the CPU end and it is very GPU intensive. So it was good to see that the RTX 2060 on pretty much very high and high settings was doing very well. But of course guys, what about the costs of the build and what should you do if you're in the market for something like this rig? Well, I tallied together what you could expect to pay if you bought this same rig at market prices, sort of like buy it now. And you're looking around at 840 US dollars, or in Australia around about 1240 Aussie dollars. Now, this is where I save money because I go get used deals. I tallied up that I saved around 230 Aussie dollars by getting a used CPU that was cheaper than market price, used RAM, and also that power supply and cooler combo, as well as the hard drive and SSD. So I did save a lot of money here on these deals, and that really brings the price down without affecting performance whatsoever. But if you're in the market to build this PC at buy it now prices, this is where I would suggest changing the motherboard, CPU, and RAM to something like Ryzen 5 2600. Because I tallied up the costs and it's pretty much exactly the same money that you would be spending if you were to go out and pay 100 US dollars for a 3930K, for example, or the Xeon equivalent, the E5 1650. The RAM you'd be paying around 72 US dollars when the DDR4 costs 100 US dollars for a 16 gigabyte kit. And then the motherboard, in this case we're using the running X79, that costs 130 US dollars. And then a B450, for example, can be had for 80 US dollars. So you're saving money on the motherboard, you're spending an extra 50 US dollars on the Ryzen 5 2600, and then you get a cooler included with that, so you don't have to go out and buy a Cooler Master 212, for example. So there it all is with the RTX 2060 and the i7 3930K. That CPU is still absolutely fine for playing titles in 2019. And as you saw with this running board, it could only get the CPU up to 3.9 gigahertz across those 12 threads and 6 cores. So if you were able to overclock it higher on a better X79 motherboard that you got on a deal, for example, you could expect the gap between that and the 9900K with an RTX 2060 to become even smaller. So it was very small to begin with. But also, I will quickly reiterate, if you guys are in the market for something similar to this, then definitely go out and buy Ryzen 5 2600 and don't pay those asking prices, unless of course you live on a remote island where you can't get access to those Amazon.com prices for new parts on Ryzen systems. But of course, the last thing to talk about before I get on out here is that Antec skeleton. That case just really impressed me. That 20 centimeter fan just over your motherboard, its VRM, your graphics card, your CPU cooler, it just gives that airflow that I think is just amazing since it's so quiet, it's so efficient, and it just does a good job of prolonging your component. Now, I know people are gonna say this case is difficult to use as a benchmark system, and I agree. I wouldn't be using this thing as a benchmark test system. I'd be using it as a personal rig that you're not gonna change the components on much. In terms of dust, just go out and get a data vac or something like that, especially if you're into PC building a lot, and you just hose it down every 6 months with some good airflow. But in terms of the case itself, I think it's got a really small footprint, especially if you compare it to something like the Aerocool Strike X. It's literally half the size and it gets the job done exactly the same. And you can still get this case. I had a look on eBay, especially in the US, there's someone selling one for 45 US dollars. I'd actually pick one up for that. It's a pretty good price. In Australia, it's a little bit more expensive from what I researched, but I'll put some links in the description below for you guys for everything featured in today's video. And also let us know in the comments section below what you think of today's build. What would you change personally or put in place of the case or the graphics card or CPU, for example? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And if you like this one, then be sure to hit that like button, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Whereas if you want to see it the moment it drops, make sure you hit that sub button with that little bell ringing. And if you want to get that inside scoop before it even gets to YouTube, be sure to check us out at Instagram, Tech Yes City. And I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.